Morning, everybody. Welcome to, well, first off, happy July 4th. Nice to have a day off. Nice to sit back and relax this morning. Hopefully, you had a day off yesterday. If not yesterday, Monday. So, what are we going to talk about today? Let's talk about Jasmine. Last week, we talked about brightness, which has jasmine characteristics. But unlike today's jasmine, there's going to be a completely different process that you're going to learn. And today's process is more a traditional process. So today is the silver jasmine session. Let's go ahead and get started. So let's first start out with where we are. We're in Fujian province. So Fujian province, a little south of the Wui Mountains, and in a valley there, Fuan. Fuan is the area. And I'm going to come back to Fuan over and over again. And there are lots of reasons. But the most important reason is it has the most famous tea research institute in China. Established in the 30s, headed by a very famous person who lived to about 110 or something. Really an interesting story. High grade research institute. So traditionally, let's talk history for a second. Jasmine has been involved in tea for over 1,000 years. Even though jasmine is not native to China, the sense of using jasmine to enhance or augment tea has been around for a while. So you have poetry in the 10th century, actually that would be the 11th century, Sung Dynasty, talking about jasmine and three different ways that jasmine interacted with tea. Remembering that at that time, people were making tea cakes. They included actual jasmine flowers in those tea cakes. So the tea cakes were scented. And when they picked it off, ground it up, and actually drank it, it had a jasmine scent to it. You had a different way also described at that time, where you just put jasmine flowers in heated water and then later on added a few tea leaves. Okay, jasmine tea. Then you actually had tea leaves and jasmine flowers going into the water at the same time. So that's what you're more used to, especially if you're drinking low-grade jasmine. See, low-grade jasmine typically has the flower and the leaves in the water at the same time, except for Blizzard, which is a high-grade jasmine. And we'll talk a little bit about what that makes that high grade and why the flowers are with the tea leaves and why that's different from low-grade jasmine. So historically, jasmine, osmanthus, plum flowers have all been involved with tea leaves. And it's specifically been green tea because that started during the time that green tea was all that was being done. So let's jump ahead 1,000 years and talk about the base of jasmine. These days, you can have any tea as a base, but predominantly in the marketplace, you see more green tea than any other style of tea as the base. There's no specific reason for that, except that traditionally that's been how it's been done. So the green tea today comes from Fujian province. It can come from anywhere. And actually during the Qing dynasty, when the Empress Dowager, she loved jasmine tea. So all the famous teas actually found their way to Fujian province, were scented with jasmine flowers and sent to the Qing dynasty as part of tribute tea. So there's a history of it running through Fujian province. And Fujian province specifically had a varietal of jasmine that was hugely, hugely aromatic. So let's jump ahead to, let's say, the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, in Fuan and other places south of the Wui Mountains, there was a drive to get organic. Wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't say get organic. Things are always organic, right? There was a drive to have some sort of certification of organic production, especially related to green tea, especially related to green tea that was going to be used for jasmine teas. And so this was led by an investor, a farmer investor in the early 2000s, because he thought, hey, if the whole village becomes sensitive to this and we all behave as a team, maybe we can get some government support. Maybe we can end up with a great product. What a visionary. All of those things happened. It was about 5 years of hard work. And during that time, everybody was impoverished because when you remove herbicides, when you remove pesticides, things don't magically become easier and organic, and you don't automatically become rich. It's a hard process. In fact, the villages involved in this whole thing complained, hey, my tea, I'm not getting the yield that I used to get. God darn it, I have to work really hard in the spring. I didn't used to have to work this hard. I just dumped stuff on the leaves and on the ground, and everything happened magically. So it took supplementation by the local government and provincial government to make sure that the peasants continued to have an interest in doing this. So they provided subsidies directly to the peasants. Were the peasants getting enriched? No, they were barely making it. But as they got to that magic time, which was 4 or 5 years into the process, all of a sudden they got into the rhythm. Hey, we can get yield. Hey, the market does want this. Oh, and we can charge more money for this. And all of a sudden, by year 5, they're beginning to make really good salaries. By year 6, they're already beginning to rebuild houses. By year 7, they're already able to get cars. So it was this magic, impoverished first, hard work at first, government subsidies, patience on everybody's part. Oh, and in addition to government subsidies, what other very important part, and this is so different from how we do it here in the West. Here in the West, we get the big corporations, have some scientists in those big corporations. We do whatever magic in the laboratory. Then we talk to the farmer, hey, use this. Oh, and by the way, you have to sign an NDA agreement. And everybody gets rich temporarily. Corporations get richer and then control that element of agriculture. In China, it's very different because the scientists got involved, but they got involved not so much as part of corporations, but through the government and government subsidies to them as well in order to help the peasants get successful in this venture, which they did. And so that's the base of these teas. By the way, it's different varietals. So this question is going to come up. I'll answer it right now. Is there one varietal that is the main base of all jasmine teas? No. The varietals matter because they absorb jasmine odors or aromas differently. And some faster, some slower, some more deeply. And so through experimentation over the years, Actually, the jasmine tea industry has started to use blends of green teas. They know the varietals and they kind of balance them. They have formulas to balance them. So you have high grade, you have medium grade, and then I can't remember what that bottom grade is, but somewhere you have all sets of the grades. Now I'm going to turn the clock back just briefly. Remember when we used to have dragon pearls in here? Remember what I told you about that? That was so special. 8 infusions. Typically, high grade in China is measured as 2 to 3 infusions. Medium grade is 1 to 2 infusions. So that dragon pearls was off the charts. What you see in China, even at the high grades, usually doesn't exceed 4 infusions. Why is this? In a minute, you're going to see. Sounds simple, right? Get some flowers, get some tea leaves. Let's see. You have to have enough space to mix everything together. Have to have some time. Yeah, 11 hours per mixing on average. What else do you have? Oh, maybe we should control the temperature because we don't want to, get mush with the flowers and the tea leaves. That doesn't sound good. In fact, it's terrible. Or you could take shortcuts. Here at Sophie's, the word shortcuts, though an 8-letter word, is a bad word. It's like a swear word, actually, because shortcuts implies some sort of economically driven measure that doesn't improve your experience. I know that the Merriam-Webster dictionary doesn't exactly describe it that way, and perhaps there should be an upgrade in the next edition, but here, shortcuts in Jasmine production mean, okay, while nobody's looking in 2015, let's introduce scented spraying of tea leaves. That's so much easier. I don't have to control the temperature as much. Less space. This is really good for everybody. Oh, except you. Because once you have the naturally scented jasmine, you can never go back. You really can't. The other scented that is sprayed on, you detect the chemicality. That's probably a made up word. The chemicalness of the spray that's used. Unavoidable. All right. So when you're doing it naturally, you're aiming for fresh and crisp. How can you go wrong? You can go wrong if the temperatures aren't right. So let's start at the beginning. You grow the tea leaves, green tea is what we're talking about. You keep those in the right at the right temperature until the jasmine's ready, and then you get the 2 at the jasmine production area. When you get the green tea to the jasmine production area, what's the first thing that the jasmine production plant looks at? It looks at, hey, what's the moisture level? If it's above 4.5%, oh no, that's too moist. Too moist produces a moisture or a liquid. When you're trying to combine the 2, it gets messy. So they fire or refire the green tea until it's down to about 4%. Step number 1. And they do this just before they're going to do the process of mixing it with the flowers. So you get that. What temperature? I'm glad you're asking the right questions. You're using 100 to 110 degrees centigrade. So about 212 to 220, 225 to refire, so to speak, the green tea until it's down to 4%. But you notice, even though I said refire, I left it to the very end because I don't like using that term, because usually when you refire, you use a higher temperature. So this is lower temperature because you don't want a burnt taste. You want that fresh green taste. So you refire, you get it to that temperature. What do you need to do next? All right, this batch is getting ready to go. You got to cool it, because you can't put flowers with tea leaves that are that temperature. What are you going to do to the flowers? The flowers, which are about 80% open, something like this, if you put that temperature, blink, they go all the way open. You get this sudden release of aroma, and it's ugly because you don't have enough time for the leaves to gradually absorb the aroma. So that means you've got to cool down those leaves. And what temperature should they be at? They should be at between 1 to 3 degrees higher than what the ambient temperature. In other words, the room you're in, if that temperature is 58 degrees, those tea leaves shouldn't be more than 61 degrees. Okay, so that's the first condition. So remember, we have moving parts now. Isn't it fun when you have moving parts? Always fun to watch. Okay. Secondly, let's look at the flowers now, because we kind of looked at the leaves. So the flowers. Can I just go out in the morning? Hey, I'm in the mood for some jasmine tea. I want to just pick some flowers. Well, if you're producing 10 to 20 tons during a season, you're not casually picking flowers. You have rules. You start at 2 p.m. picking flowers. What should those flowers look like? I want the most beautiful flowers. No. That's not what you say to yourself. You say, I want the flowers that are just starting to open. That's 2 p.m. From 2 p.m. to 5 or 6, sometimes in some places up to 7, it really matters what the local temperature is. In Guangxi, where we were last week, those flowers, and it's a very famous place where they grow lots of flowers down there, they pick all the way out to 8 or 9 because the temperature is okay. In Fujian, they pick to about 5 or 6 or 7, no later than that usually. So the flowers are just open. They have to handle the flowers carefully. So you can't have compression. You can't have huge piling. That's a compression problem. But more importantly, what happens when you pile things on each other? If they're organic things, they generate heat. Do flowers inherently like heat? Well, actually, secretly, the answer is yes. But producers of this process don't like that heat because it causes the flower to open too quickly. So you get back to the factory, you arrange those flowers in piles, and those piles can't be more than about 40 centimeters high. You arrange them in piles, and then you grade them. So by grade, what am I talking about? An A if you're opening really fast, and F if you're opening really slowly. No, not that type of grade. The grade is size of flower. Because as it turns out, when you're doing great jasmine tea, if you want to do the highest quality, you're going to do one thing first. You're going to say to the producer, hey, mine is high quality. Remember, when I get that on the market, I'm going to be charging $1,000 an ounce. Ooh, okay. Well, give me the largest flowers. They use the largest flowers. What if I'm lazy and want to, I have a bunch of smaller flowers. They smell real good, Can I use those first before I use the larger flowers? Or better yet, can I mix them with the large flowers? Kind of shortcut the process. Not unless you want a disastrous result. By the way, it's a result you can't fix because the grade of the flower controls how fast the leaves are going to absorb. And smaller flowers absorb more slowly. The larger flowers, which give off more aroma, absorb more quickly. If you choose to blend, in other words, do one pass of large and then because you're in a hurry or you're an LCS or there are a number of reasons you might do that. Then you sneak in the smaller flowers at the second pass. Not a good idea though, because the smaller flowers don't give as fresh and crisp an aroma as the larger flower. So you grade the flowers and you've already decided, yeah, we're going to have great grade and we're going to infuse a bunch of times. Your pile of large flowers shouldn't be more than 300 pounds. So you put more than 300 pounds. Two things happen. That's a lot of flowers in one place. I don't know if you've really ever seen 300 pounds of picked flowers. A lot of flowers. There's a piling issue, so there's a heat issue, and then there's a compression issue, right? Because it doesn't matter how large or small 300 pounds is. 300 pounds is still compression pounds. So you have these flowers. At what point can you use them? Remember, they're just beginning to open when you pick, and now you've got them graded, and you're sitting back and thinking, I'm pretty good. I graded all of these. I'm ready to go. Except you're not, because the flowers, when they get to 60% open, so something like this, maybe a little bit, something like that, what do you have to do then? You have to lay them out again. And what are you looking to do? Did you grade them all perfectly at the first time around? Of course not. You were in a hurry. So now you pick out the ones that are truly large flowers. Oh, and what else is in there? What about some of the buds you thought were going to open and didn't open? Oh, you got to get rid of those because something wrong, right? They're not going to give off the aroma that you want. What else is in there? Oh, you picked up a few caterpillars and so forth. Caterpillars don't smell that good. So, that's not going to improve the quality. I've never seen caterpillar infused tea. So, probably not a good idea. Let's get rid of those. What about the stalks and every other miscellaneous thing that got in there? Let's get rid of those. Now we have a full 50 to 60% open, and we're going to pile that again. And by piling that, you will create a little heat. Why is that good? Because you still can't use 50 to 60%. That's not what's going to be mixed with the flowers, but at least now you've got really good flowers, and it's only that. You don't have anything else. So this is harder than I thought it was. Are there any more hard steps? Yikes. There are probably some more hard steps too. And the more I talk, the more space you're envisaging. And you are correct to envisage. Let's stop using that word. It's an 8-letter word that I shouldn't be using. We'll put that on the list. Don't use that word anymore. All right. You are picturing in your head the size of the warehouse is getting larger and larger. And it is, because what do you have to do with the tea? You have to spread it very thinly on mats in preparation to get the flowers on. So the question you're naturally going to ask me, and it's a great question, what percentage of flowers should I use? What's the ratio of flowers to tea? That's what you're going to ask me. And you're going to ask me poundage. Very great question. So it's nearly 1-to-1 if you're using jasmine. If you're using magnolia, it's 1% if you're pre-infusing. In other words, 1 pound of magnolia flowers to 100 pounds of tea if you are pre-infusing. And why would you pre-infuse? Let me remind you. For those of you who had our dragon pearls, did you not love that jasmine? That was pre-infused. It was also post-infused. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about post-infusion, but that one, as an experiment, was infused with orchids. Yes.
Jeremy asked, tell us about the jasmine pickers. How are they trained? Are there enough of them? How long is their season? Do they select the flowers for the tea farmer, etc.? Whatever you can share.
Yeah. So jasmine flower pickers, you can't just go into a random village or city. Hey, I'm going to hire some of you. It's just like picking the tea leaves. It's the exact same skill. You do not get untrained seasonal workers. You get seasonal workers that season after season, year after year, lineage after lineage, come and pick jasmine flowers because there are checkers. And when the checkers come around, hey, what's this? You have a marigold in here with jasmine. That's not very good. And this jasmine isn't open just the right way. No. The money, let's see, not salary. They're more like contract workers. The money for these type of workers, just like for the experienced tea leaf pickers in the best regions of China, and Fujian is one of the best regions, are well paid. And they're well paid because the season is relatively short. So what is relative? 2 months. And actually, some of these workers migrate to Guangxi during the other 4 available months. There's actually 6 months of availability of picking jasmine if you start early in Fujian and in Guangxi. So unlike tea leaves, there's no tea leaf that has a 6-month continuous picking. Of course, you can pick in the spring and you can pick in the fall, but that's not continuous. The jasmine, it's continuous. And so those are migrant workers. They migrate from one area to the other, typically, not always. I mean, some villages, they only go during the 2-month period because that's all they want to do. And again, these years, they're well compensated because it's hard to get these workers and it's hard to make sure that they're trained at the right level. So the best way to do that is to pay them well. So yes, full-on training is required. All right, so we're still here thinking about all the space that we're using. We have laid out a layer of green tea leaves. In this case, it could be any leaves. We're not infusing this particular batch that I'm talking about with magnolias, where it's 1 pound to 100 pounds. Instead, we're saying 180 pounds to 200 pounds is the ratio of the large jasmine flowers to the tea leaves. And so we're going to divide it into fifths. Thin layer at the bottom, fifth of the flowers, another layer, another fifth, and all the way to the top where you have a top fifth layer of the flowers and then a layer of green tea on top of that. Why do you put that extra layer on top? You want that aroma to stick in to this set of infusion. Infusion typically takes 11 hours. But I ask you this. If you are infusing 100 pounds or 200 pounds of tea at a time, is the temperature going to stay steady? And the answer is no. That temperature must remain between 32 degrees centigrade and 37 degrees centigrade. As soon as it gets to 38, boink, we got to take everything apart. And by take everything apart, it's spread out everything because the temperature cannot get to that level. What happens when the temperature gets to that level? The flour, which has been patiently and beautifully going from 80% towards 100%, it's giving off the aroma in a rich, nice way, in a steady way. Oh, 38 degrees and going higher, let me open faster. And that wrecks this process. And that's why at 38 degrees, they immediately spread everything out, get that temperature down, and start again. And that typically happens after 5 hours. So there's usually one redo in that 11-hour period. So that completes that part. What's next? Okay, so this was day one. Now, wait a minute. Did we say we want higher grade or lower grade? Oh, wait a minute. This is Sophie's. We want higher grade. That means day two, we got to repeat the process. Can we save money and use the same flowers that we used yesterday? Oh my God. Those flowers are exhausted. We cannot reuse those. You're over here because I'm still talking. Okay, that's a good reason to be over here. I'm almost finished. Those flowers they're thrown away. You do it again a second day, you do it again a third day. And for Sophie's tea, we need more, etc. At the end of the process, third, fourth, or fifth day, you separate. And when you separate, why do you separate? Because the flowers themselves have more moisture than the tea, and that influences the ability to store the tea. So you really don't, in good quality jasmine, want to see many flowers in there because, except for blizzard, and blizzard's a completely different situation, which when time permits, I will explain to you, because it influences the moisture in the tea. All right. I've obviously influenced your thirst levels, and we've gotten through the basics for that. And I'll tell you a few more things before we close up. So, with great anticipation, it brings me great pleasure to bring the numinous tea master to the fold to demonstrate the brewing and help you get ready on this jasmine process.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah. Hi, good morning. Yeah. We do jasmine. Yeah. But I still like it, but jasmine, yeah. So I use the gloves. Okay. John, this
So you see her setup. Your setup would be 2 cups and a strainer. Everything else you don't need to have. We have a large production crew, so we need to have all of these. But the principle is the same. And you're using glass because this is just like green tea. It responds best to heat that becomes dissipated fairly quickly. All right, Tea Master draws the water. heats the glasses. Make sure all of them get heated and cleaned. And look at the rhythm. This is the beautiful thing about doing tea. Being present, enjoying the rhythm, understanding the rhythm, and understanding how you're interacting to get the magical results. So I'm gonna put timers on this. It's 2 minutes per steeping. And this is 4 grams. Tea Master is drawing 175-degree water, which is very appropriate for this.
Jonathan asks, as you have mentioned, green tea is considered cool in the traditional Chinese medicine context. Do you know whether the jasmine essence affects that at all?
That's a great question.那个 Jasmine 应该在那个 Juniors word 还是
No.
Okay, yes,
干燥，不
okay.
是这个滑。
Okay, these are appropriately mixed because both are considered cooling in traditional Chinese medicine. And while the question implied, the way it was asked, the question seems to ask, is it purposely put together to enhance that cooling effect? From a TCM point of view, the answer would be yes. From the producer's point of view, the answer, they're not paying that much attention to that. What they're paying attention to is a good outcome. So it's a great question because there's 2 different points of view. TCM, absolutely. All right, you see that the tea master is putting the tea leaves in the cup, heated cups. Shakes because she's trying to distribute the heat. Make sure that those leaves are heated up. I'm sorry, what did you say?
这个是茶艺比赛就有这个事。茶艺比赛，
Yeah. 就是这个样子，对不对？Yeah, yeah. When you do a competition, this is exactly how a competition would go, making sure that the leaves are appropriately heated. Everything, yes, all these steps which seem like they're superfluous from a tea competition standpoint, they're not superfluous. And at every step, judges are making judgments.
Rob comments, I wonder whether the smell of jasmine pickers, I assume they end up smelling strongly of jasmine after a day of picking, inspired poetry or jasmine body products.
You know, this is a great comment / question because Rob is talking about he notices that the smell is so intense. Would this among pickers or people who were around this process incite poetry, incite or encourage poetry? And the answer is absolutely yes. And let me tell you, as a small digression, that again, the Empress Dowager in the Qing dynasty loved jasmine, and she actually used to put fresh jasmine flowers in her hair. I have it right here. And it was forbidden from anybody else in the court to carry jasmine flowers in their hair unless the Empress Dowager gave permission. And this is, I mean, she's at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, in terms of the desirability of jasmine flowers and how unique they are. And therefore, in society, you also have people who really loved it. You have lots of poetry about jasmine, the fragrance of jasmine, the pleasantness of jasmine tea. So yes, that exists. So let me give you a quick explanation of why Blizzard is different than other jasmines. This was invented in 1995 by Tea Master in Sichuan. And essentially what he did, and the first one of these has gone off, Tea Master will separate the tea leaves from the tea water from the first two. And in a minute, I'll continue that story. Take a look at the nice rhythm. Being present. Not in a hurry, just getting it right. I'm in. You. Oh, well, oh, yeah, no, okay, okay. So while we're waiting for the third one, look at this color. Beautiful, beautiful color. Nice, what I would say light green, little hint of yellowish in it. So let's enter the quality arena. Well, let's not enter the quality arena. Tea Master is taking care of this third cup here. 1 second. Ready. Ready to pour that one out. Beautiful. Okay. So let's enter the quality arena. No, I will enter the quality arena and you'll enter it in a minute. So remember, this first sip is about astringency, mouthfeel, and then aftertaste. So there's a couple things I'm going to say about this right away. Astringency is different than last week. That's the first thing. Aftertaste is also definitely different than last week. Get your notes out because this is really important. In fact, the entire vibe of this is different than last week. And that's why I love doing these two teas back to back. I'm going to take a second sip here. And so I believe one of you is new to the broadcast. So remembering you're not brewing yet, you'll be brewing momentarily. Okay, not only are all those points that I just described different from last week, I'll tell you what, the flavor of this is profoundly different as well. So it is your turn to brew and enter the quality arena.
You know, when you talked about the separation of flowers from the tea leaves for the different infusions, that must entail a somewhat like specially designed set of screens of To
Great
sift out
question.
flour, then you want to do it expeditiously because you.
Great question.
Let's-
So, yes, it does have different types of sieves. It has different types of delicate rakes because we're talking about quite a lot of tea. And these rakes they're able to use these rakes. And by the way, this sounds like it's something you and I can do because we rake our leaves, right? Every fall when the leaves gather on the sidewalk or on the lawn or wherever they gather, we rake that up. Can't we just use some metal rakes like that? Answer would be no. They have specialized rakes and they use those to kind of pull everything apart. They use sieves to get the flowers separated from the leaves. And then when they relay everything, they use those rakes to make sure everything is even without disturbing the layering. And that's the most important thing. Because if you rake, particularly at that bottom level, you don't want to create blank spots on the mat and so forth. So these guys know what they're doing and have been doing this for a long time. Let's see. Yes, you're preparing yours right now. You're setting your timer for 2 minutes for each of these.
Peter hypothesizes who would be welcomed home more readily, someone who worked at crafting jasmine tea or someone who worked at crafting smoky pine. An important question, when you're choosing employment.
When you're choosing employment, well, certainly, what an interesting question. Certainly, for smoky pine, this is the one thing I can say with certainty, and that is that you have more environmental harmful things if you're working because you're working in a smoky environment. And so that's a little harder on the body. I would say it's easier to actually do what you need to do in the smoky environment, but it's harder on the body. And actually, as a reminder, they do let me make sure I say, yeah, I'm gonna say this like 20 in and 40 out. So it's 20 minutes in the room where the tea leaves are getting smoked, and then 40 minutes out of the room. And so, that's actually a lot of time, 20 minutes. It goes by fast. It depends. If you're experienced, it goes by fast. But that's the current rules for doing that. All right, and you see the tea master dissipating the steam, cooling the water. You get a better flavor when you do this. And you certainly get a much better flavor if you're not covering it. Hey, tea master's going to put the tea leaves, which is what you should be doing. Bag number 2, labeled silver jasmine. Remember, she's not directly handling the leaves because your hands contain usually smells which can influence. We're talking about a type of tea where subtle influences could become quite obvious. And she pours the water back in the kettle so she can control the flow of water into the cup. Doesn't pour directly into the leaves.
Oh my.
Yeah, that's first enough.
Yeah.
I got it.
Second.
The beautiful one the Tea Master has. All right. So, Blizzard, 1995, Citron Tea Master. What did this Tea Master do that was so different from what anybody else previously had done? Tea Master imagined to himself, you know what? Let's get an aesthetic vision going with this. Let's not just have the flavor. Let's do something which is very beautiful. And so he went through this process of infusing. In other words, jasmine flowers layered with the leaves, all the standard stuff, did it for 3 or 4 times, and then he took another varietal of jasmine, and this was a smaller flower, and baked them. He baked them until they were about 4% moisture left in them. Why did he bake them? Because his intent was at the end of the regular jasmine flower, add these. So you can't have more moisture than should be in the leaves, right? 4%. And secondly, he wanted the jasmine flowers to be stable. And that's how Blizzard was created. And the effect he was looking for was to get that swirling as if you were in a blizzard. It's not named Blizzard by an accident. It really does have that effect as if you're in a blizzard. In Chinese, it really means blizzard. Chaos, right? And Tea Master in terrific rhythm here. Wow, this is unbelievable.
It's goofy.
I can't do 2 cups at the same time. She just pulled off 6 incredible cups. I wish I had this still.
Jeremy asked, which jasmine variety is used for tea most?
Which jasmine variety is used for what?
Is primarily used for tea. Is there a variety of green tea that is used, or variety of tea that's used for the green tea more frequently?
No, all varietals of green tea are available. The
Actually, sorry, I misunderstood the question. Which jasmine flower variety? Apologies.
okay, so there's over 200 different varietals. And so the result is it depends on what your end result is supposed to be. So there isn't, in quotes, a most common one. Although I will tell you, at the market level of tea, they're using the least expensive jasmine. Because think about what I said in the setup. 180 pounds of jasmine flowers to 200 pounds of tea leaves. That's a lot of picking. That's number one. That is a grossly huge number of flowers. Oh, and you got to do that 3 times per 200 pounds. And you're doing tons of tea every year. So turns out in every producer's arsenal of calculations, they're looking much more carefully at the flower prices than they are the tea prices. The tea prices in some way can be standardized. That's a silly thing to say, but let me explain what I mean by that. You can blend varietals according to price and know ahead of time very easily what that price is going to be, because usually it's done in the spring. You already have a heads up for it. Make those calculations. The flowers are the flowers. And when they come, you got to work. You can't just pick and say, well, okay, we'll put these away for a month or 2 or 3. It's at this time, what's today's price of this particular varietal of jasmine flower? And that's what makes this so difficult. And that, by the way, is why shortcutters and LCSers spray it on. Because, the cost of spray is pretty standardized, and I can buy next year's spray this year, so I know how much it's going to cost. It is hideously difficult to do it in this manner because A, it takes so long, and B, again, thinking of the massive size of flowers. I mean, you have to have acre after acre after acre. It has to be well organized, watered properly, cared for, make sure that everything is going the way it's supposed to be. Yes.
Jonathan observes, initially this tea is less astringent than last week, still thick, but softer a bit, while the jasmine aroma is seriously big.
Okay, so Jonathan talks about this tea, the jasmine aroma hugely evident in this one, no question. Talks about the astringency being less than the brightness last week. And the third thing, the astringency.
That the aroma is quite huge.
There was something else.
That it's less astringent than last week, still thick, but softer. But softer.
Still thick but softer. This is an interesting comment. Still thick but softer. Clearly the viscous thickness is a clear call. The softer implies I'm going to ask a further question. Is that softer in the actual mouthfeel or softer in the aroma? Which softness are we talking about here?
Mouthfeel and astringency.
Oh, mouthfeel and astringency. Got it. Yeah. Clearly, in terms of astringency, much softer than last week's. But you still have a density, although from my judgment, last week's is more dense than this week's.
Jonathan adds, it's clean and fresh, and this is obviously handcrafted.
This is a good point. Clean and fresh, obviously handcrafted. It is obviously handcrafted. And I like the comments about clean and fresh because this doesn't have any cloying quality to it. It doesn't have any of the sprayed on quality to it. If you were tasting sprayed on jasmine, you would have kind of this cloying quality, and it would just not be soft. It would not have any hints of subtlety to it. Yes.
Peter says, I find this more well-rounded compared to last week's tea, like the mid-range is filled in if it were a song.
This is a great comment also. More rounded than last week's tea. So let me address to Peter and all of you an important aspect of last week's versus this week's. So did last week's tea undergo round after round after round of infusion? The answer is no, because that was a hybridized thing. This is a true jasmine infusion tea. And so you're talking about the mid-range being filled in. Love that comment because, yes, last week's was the result of a complete hybridization, and you had just that quality of the tea. Here you have blended tea underneath, right? And then on top of that, you have this higher level of infusion. So this thing got infused at least 3 times and just done beautifully. And so that's what fills in those middle notes. And that's a really good catch to identify those middle notes. Both you and Jonathan are identifying some things which reflect that this was infused multiple times.
Jonathan asked, do you like this? How often would you drink this tea?
You know, I love these type of questions because again, it's like me asking you, do you love all your children? And you know, you love them and you love them all equally, theoretically, and yet all equally doesn't mean you love them the same. So do I love this the same way, for example, that I love smoky pine? Now that might be an approximately good answer.
This seems like a beautiful tea for a gift, Jonathan says.
This is a beautiful tea gift. When people come in, particularly young people, and they're getting tea for the elder, for the experienced generation, one of the things, if they don't know where they want to go and they don't really understand the experienced generation preferences, then I point them to this tea because it is very reasonably priced for the process it goes through. And it's a beautiful tea to serve to guests. It really is.
Peter says, not to go too vaguely woo, but I find these jasmine teas are high frequency and I could be tipping towards lightheadedness.
You know, I love that quote. Tipping towards lightheadedness.
Lightheadedness.
Oh, lightheadedness. Okay. Different thought. There is a different energy with these teas. And if you're saying lightheadedness as opposed to a groundedness, I kind of sense where you're going because lightheadedness means that it hits the high notes right away from an energetic standpoint. The grounding is you have to, in some points, work harder for those energy notes. If that's what you're referring to, I think we're on the same page. Okay. Oh my God, overtalked. I tried really hard to not overtalk today. So you notice in the beginning, I talk fast. I cut out most of the stories. I thought I did a great job of cutting out most of the stories. Nonetheless, we're already here at the conclusion of today's session. Love being together with you during a session like this because this requires a different type of tasting routine. And you're all clearly up to it and appreciate the commentary that you've offered for this tea. So, what are we going to do next week? You know, last week we did hybridized the taste jasmine. This week we did high quality, infused a lot. What's left for next week? I can't even think what's that. Let me kind of think in my mind. Is there any conditions we put on next week? You know what? Let's not put any conditions on next week. Let's do unconditional next week. You guys are in for a special treat next week. Have a happy 4th of July. Have lots of fun. Well, not too much. Be careful with the fireworks. Be healthy this week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.